The editors of the website Motor Biscuit put it simply: if you're of a certain age, you remember the days when station wagons filled the roads. Yes, automotive magazines will remind us that station wagons are still for sale, that they're very popular in Europe, and on a semi-regular basis predict that they'll be making a comeback. But for those of us of a certain age, those days when you shoved the entire neighborhood into the back of the station wagon in order to go to the drive-in movie or enjoyed the freedom of the way back seat, are not just a thing of the past. They're almost a foreign concept to people who aren't old enough to remember the 1980s. Station wagons represent more than a quaint era in American automotive history. For nearly 4 decades, they were the very symbol of family life in America. Whether for the family road trips you took across the country or as the car that carried your stuff to college, the history of the great American station wagon deserves to be remembered. A 2014 edition of The Atlantic writes, "Station wagons, the ultimate vacation vehicle, is a uniquely American automotive design development with an origin almost as old as the automotive industry itself." The predecessor to the station wagon was something called a depot hack. Hack was short for hackney, which meant essentially cab for hire. Originally a type of horse-drawn wagon, early automobile depot hacks were custom modifications, often based on the Ford Model T truck chassis, essentially the famous Model T with a longer wheelbase. The Ford Model TT was usually simply sold as a chassis, and the buyer would supply the body. The website Coach Built writes that although some very early Ford trucks were sold with commercial bodies, Ford discontinued the program in 1913, leaving the field wide open for enterprising commercial body builders through 1924, when the first factory-built Ford Model T pickups were introduced. Bodies were built by companies like the York Body Company of York, Pennsylvania, and the Stoughton Wagon Company of Stoughton, Wisconsin, and included among the types of truck bodies was the depot hack. Depot hacks were for-hire services customized to transport passengers from train depots. And as such, they were given a covered body built for both seating more passengers and carrying large amounts of luggage. Tad Burness, author of the long-running Auto Album newspaper column, wrote in 1978, "What is a depot hack? Well, basically it's a predecessor of today's station wagon, often a combination of open-sided station wagon and full-length covered pickup truck, all in one." As an aside, depot hacks bore an outside resemblance to canopy trucks, which differed in that canopy trucks maximized cargo and so only had the seating at the front. One of the most popular canopy trucks was designed by automotive pioneer Ransom Eli Olds and was called the Rio Speedwagon. In 1967, the words Rio Speedwagon were written on the chalkboard of a history of transportation class at the University of Illinois that was taken by Neil Dowdy, who decided to use that as the name of his band, although instead of pronouncing it like the car company did, Rio Speedwagon, they always pronounced the letters separately, R-E-O Speedwagon. And if your parents were cool, you might have heard REO Speedwagon coming through the AM radio, or if they were really cool, the 8-track player in your family station wagon. Depot hacks also had other names: carryalls, suburbans, and as depots were also called stations, and the bodies resemble and largely served the same purpose as wagons and were literally often built by wagon companies, wagons, thus station wagon. In 1923, Star, a brand of Durant Motors, which was attempting to offer direct competition with Ford, produced the first production model station wagon, and many aficionados consider that to be the first actual station wagon. While there is disagreement over the definition, Dictionary.com defines station wagon as an automobile with one or more rows of folding or removable seats behind the driver and no luggage compartment, but an area behind the seats into which suitcases, parcels, etc. can be loaded through a tailgate. StationWagon.com notes an oft-used description of the classic stretched wheelbase, rear-wheel drive vehicle derived from a standard production automobile, usually sedan or hardtop chassis, beginning with the 1923 Star and ending with the 1996 Buick Roadmaster Estate Wagon, although the website itself uses a somewhat broader definition. And the Star, of course, used a wood body. Automotive historian Norm Mort explains in his 2010 book, American Woodies, Stoughton Wagon Company and Martin Perry supplied the varnished wooden bodies, which were shipped to the factory to be fitted and then shipped to the dealers. Production totals for the Star Woody station wagon are unknown, but it's thought only a handful of Star Durant 1923 production were station wagons. It makes sense that these early station wagons used wood bodies. The original custom bodies for depot hacks have been produced by wagon and cabinet makers. More continues. During the 1920s, station wagon bodies were being offered on dozens of other American automakers' chassis, including the more popular makes such as Dodge, Overland, Chevrolet, Maxwell, Rio, Essex, and Buick. Buick offered 3 different models of its passenger express Woody. Although some companies utilized the truck chassis for station wagons, the trend was towards using a larger car chassis. The popularity of the station wagon grew, and that fact was not missed by the world's largest auto manufacturer. Mort writes, "The Woody station wagon market continued to expand, and Henry Ford was well aware of this fact. With the end of Model T production in 1927 and the introduction of the Model A in 1928, Ford was set to offer its own production Woody station wagon. Despite previous models, Popular Mechanics noted in 2013 that the 1929 Model A was the first of what we've come to know as a mass-produced Woody." Mort writes, "Ford led the way in station wagon sales and will continue to dominate the market right into the era of all-steel versions." Still, station wagons were not yet considered family cars. Stationwagons.com writes that until after World War II, station wagons were generally regarded as commercial vehicles like trucks, and production volume was low. Station wagons accounted for less than 1% of motor vehicle sales in 1940. But the end of the Second World War brought an economic, car, and family boom, and with it, the era of the station wagon. One interesting question is why the use of wood bodies on station wagons continued even as steel began to replace wood for most other auto manufacturing. The website of Hemmings Classic Car Auction explains, despite the Great Depression, automotive advancements came thick and fast. Once General Motors' all-steel car bodies arrived on the scene for 1936, the days of wood seemed numbered. Yet, Hemmings notes, steel, with all its strengths, durability, and manufacturing efficiency, failed to eliminate wood altogether. Before the war, wood was used for a variety of reasons. Lots of material and people knew how to work it. Ford's processing plant at Iron Mountain was adjacent to a 500,000-acre forest, and wooden-bodied carts possessed a cozy, down-home style. On the other side of World War II, the use of wood became rather more necessary. Steel remained in short supply, was doled out gingerly by a government looking to convert the wartime machine to peacetime prosperity. Wood had no such shortage, and it's little wonder that the late 1940s saw a surfeit of wood-bodied passenger cars like Chrysler's Town and Country line or the Ford Sportsman. Popular Mechanics notes that as use of steel became more widespread, designers used wood more for styling. Steel improved body strength and durability, but customers continued to call for the warm look of wood. In a reversal of sorts, as steel stamping became cheaper and commonplace, genuine wood trim became a luxury. The workmanship recalled old world charm. The Chrysler Town and Country was the brand's most luxurious model from 1941 to 1959. One surprising impact of the wood-bodied station wagon was maple bark disease. Dr. Tom Johnson explains in Ron Kalwacki's 1998 book Station Wagon, a tribute to America's workaholic on wheels. A little-known fact about the production of Model A Ford station wagons by Henry Ford in Michigan's Upper Peninsula is that a new disease was described because of it. According to Dr. Johnson, a Dr. John Toohey had several patients come into his sanatorium in Michigan with symptoms similar to tuberculosis. Toohey eventually figured out that the problem was that the sawmill used to cut logs for Ford was cutting logs that had been felled the year before and allowed to lie in the woods. In that time, fungus had started growing to the bark and was thrown up as a black dust when the logs were cut. Breathing the dust caused an allergic reaction, inflaming the lungs of some workers. Johns writes that Dr. Toohey solved the problem by spraying water on the saw. Maple bark disease wasn't the only problem, however. Wood simply took more time and craftsmanship and couldn't keep up with the car boom. Auto historian Charlie Crowell wrote on the website Article Biz, the 1949 Chevrolet, Pontiac, and Oldsmobile wagons featured just a strip of wood running lengthwise down the side, along with a wooden tailgate. By mid-year, the wood was gone, replaced by a wood grain decal. The last major maker to offer a full production wagon with real wood on the exterior was Buick in 1953. And just like that, the Woody era was over. Hemmings writes that the golden age of the factory-built, wood-bodied station wagon was a narrow slice of history. Really, just 2 decades. And yet the wooden station wagon became an indelible part of American culture. Crowell explains, but another chapter for these wonderful vehicles was about to unfold. In the early 60s, the surfing craze began. Surfers, who always seemed to be strapped for cash, found that they could buy Woodies cheap, and that they were perfect for lugging around the long surfboards of the day. When surfing music arrived, groups like the Beach Boys immortalized Woodies in their songs. Immediately, the connection between surfing and Woodies became permanent. In fact, Crowell writes, it was the surfers and their music that gave rise to the term Woody. While wood had met its end in manufacturing, its reputation lived on. You could say it had become ingrained in popular culture. Author Aaron Widmore writes in the automotive magazine The News Wheel, Woodies became so ingrained in surf culture that faux wood paneling stuck around well past the 1960s. So if you're wondering why your 90s minivan had fake wood paneling on the side, blame a surfer. Popular Mechanics writes, over the latter half of the 20th century, faux wood paneling produced some real eyesores. But while the Woody was on its way out, the era of the station wagon had just begun. Famous automotive historian Bill Vance wrote in 2021, in the decades immediately after the war, station wagons became totally integrated into North American life, particularly the phenomenon known as suburban living. The tract housing created to accommodate burgeoning young families. The suburbs demanded private motorized transportation. Public transit was thin or non-existent, and the long distances made walking impractical. The station wagon was the natural carrier of children, pets, garden supplies, home furnishings, and the myriad other items of suburban life. Author Charlie Moss writes in The Atlantic, at one point in America's automotive history, the station wagon defined the typical modern middle-class family. For more than 40 years, we trusted it to get us where we needed to go, to haul what we needed to be hauled. Moss had first-hand experience on the subject. Growing up, my family owned a burgundy 1984 Chevrolet Caprice Classic station wagon, complete with faux wood paneling and a rooftop luggage rack. It fit 9 passengers comfortably, and over the course of its 17-year lifetime, it made no less than 12 road trips from Chattanooga, Tennessee to Florida, carrying our entire family's luggage on its roof. The allure of the station wagon is not always easy to explain and is intimately tied to nostalgia. Writing in Auto Influence magazine, author Julia Austin notes, there's just some satisfying nostalgia about being in a station wagon. Everyone has those precious memories of piling into one and passing a variety of things from snacks to headphones through its long body for backseat passengers to access. Something about the low roof made you feel all close together. Get in the wagon was a phrase yelled countless times a day, and when it was time to go to school or leave for the family road trip. There's something wholesome about the station wagon, something distinctly Americana. Preston Burt, editor-in-chief of Retrified magazine, wrote in 2021, as big as a boat, as heavy as a tank, and reminiscent of a coffin-toting hearse, there was no greater status symbol signaling to the world that I am a middle-class suburbanite. Whether you drove a Plymouth Reliant, a Buick Roadmaster, a Chevy Caprice Classic, or a Ford Country Squire, the moms and dads up and down the carpool line knew you were bringing the heat. As long haulers, people develop bonds with their wagon. Kalwaki quotes Jimmy Davis of Wetumpka, Alabama. I was doing aircraft modifications at Air Force bases all over the country in 1958. Our 1956 Ford Victoria couldn't haul our belongings, so we traded it and $200 for a 1956 Ford Country Sedan, 4-door, 6-passenger station wagon. Had plenty of room for my wife, our 7-month-old daughter, and me. Everything we owned was carried with us in that wagon. My daughter ate many meals in her car seat as we traveled from airbase to airbase all over the country for the next 2 years. We had a place to put everything, and it was loaded in the same spot each time we moved. The same boxes were always saved and used each time. In 1963, I finally traded the trusty wagon for a 1964 2-door sedan. Our daughter started crying at the dealership as they drove our wagon away. It was the only car she had ever known. If we'd known how much trouble we'd have with that sedan, I think my wife and I would have been crying with her. While they came in many forms, station wagons never seemed to lack for bells and whistles. Writing on the website Cheapism in 2021, author Jason Nolte notes the unique attributes of the Ford LTD Country Squire. Its magic door gate flipped down like a truck tailgate or swung open like a door. At 19 feet long and powered by V8 engines, the Country Squire was huge and sold hundreds of thousands of vehicles a year. The kids of its era are more likely to remember it for its side-facing seats, a magnetic checkerboard, optional CB radio, and hidden rear cargo compartment. This is the wagon that introduced kids to the Wayback. Austin calls out a uniquely station wagon draw. Remember those fun rear-facing seats? You don't find them much anymore, but if you do, it'll be in a station wagon. Growing up, you'd battle with the other kids over who got those seats. This was the cherished place to be in the car. You could make funny faces at the vehicles behind you or eat the candy you snuck in the car that your parents didn't know about. Those rear-facing seats were just magical. Despite their size, with their massive V8 engines, they weren't slouches on the road. Kalwaki quotes Robert Buckus of Topeka, Kansas. A new 1960 Cascade Green Parkwood wagon is the first car of which I had any vivid memories. Dad took what the dealer had that February and it was equipped with a 348 V8. He loved to challenge the early hot rods at intersections. who all gave him a funny look in the station wagon, but weren't laughing when he zoomed by. Still, Vuckus makes an important point about the size of a station wagon, some as much as 19 feet long and built for 6 to 9 passengers. We never appreciated the hauling capacity of a station wagon more than when we did not have it. Needless to say, I love station wagons for their utility, and their style is also a plus. But when I say my car can really haul, we're talking about groceries and cargo. That hauling capacity made them part of family vacations, not just in the trip, but as part of the destination. Author Gene Gable wrote in Creative Pro magazine in 2012, station wagons weren't just automobiles, they were often extensions of the home. Big enough to transport a lot of gear, the station wagon was the vehicle of choice for adventuresome families traveling to the beach, campground, or lake. Their big engines were plenty powerful to pull a trailer or boat, and while the kids might sleep in a tent, Mom and Dad could always stretch out in the back of the wagon, where comfort and privacy were a bit better. To some, a station wagon was more than a car, it was a way of life. In 1957, Ford published a pamphlet called Station Wagon Living. Wagon living is a new term in our language. You begin to understand it when you see a picnicking family beside some lake with a 2-burner stove, cooler, and food hamper on the tailgate. You see it when Dad and Junior slide a lightweight boat with a beam of 4 feet inside the wagon bound for an afternoon of fishing. You see it in the drive-in movie where Mom and Dad have quartered their 2 youngsters in the padded car rear end of the wagon with a bag of popcorn. With a wagon, the older folks can take the children's bedroom to the drive-in. Outdoor hobbyists find the wagon to their liking, whether they be skiers, skin divers, outboard racers, or photographers. Wagons can easily swallow a lot of bulky equipment. The wagon has revolutionized the long camping trip. And yet wagon living faded. Stephen Williams wrote in the New York Times in 2019. The station wagon, known also depending on the culture as an estate, an avant, a woody, combi, or caravan, was a key family hauler for much of the 20th century. Wagon shuttled goods to market, picked up arriving guests at the train station, ferried the children to soccer, and served as sleep-in digs for broke surfers. But these long-roofed, 2-box conveyances became victims of the gas crisis of the 1970s. Sales and demand eroded further in the 80s with the emergence of Chrysler's minivan. The big-time blow was struck in the 90s. It was called the Sport Utility Vehicle. Suddenly, the great American station wagon was gone. GM's last models were the 1996 Chevy Caprice and Buick Roadmaster. Ford held on and continued to offer a wagon version of the Taurus until 2005. Today, no station wagon models are produced in the United States. Foreign models are available, but the website Car for Sale notes that they make up just 1% of U.S. auto sales. And honestly, the modern front-wheel drive things are hardly the same vehicle. There are various explanations that people have offered why people prefer the larger size of a minivan or SUVs because they rode up higher, but at some point, station wagons just seem to become uncool, as epitomized by the Wagon Queen family truckster that was the center of the 1983 movie National Lampoon's Vacation. But to be fair, it's difficult to take someone seriously when they're calling you uncool while driving a minivan. One lesser-known point is that U.S. corporate average fuel and economy standards, first enacted in 1975, treated station wagons as passenger cars, while minivans and SUVs generally qualified as light trucks, which face less stringent efficiency standards. Thus, minivans and SUVs could provide the space and functionality that station wagons used to offer, while wagons struggled to meet fuel efficiency requirements. And to be fair, many of the design elements that make minivans and SUVs popular were derived from station wagons. Moss notes in The Atlantic that the station wagon left an indelible imprint on the future of automotive design. But the great American station wagon is today now just the province of a small but enthusiastic group of classic car enthusiasts and restorers, and the fading memories of people of a certain age. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy. Check out our community on thehistoryguideguild.locals.com, our webpage at thehistoryguy.com, and our merchandise at teespring.com, or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo. And if you'd like more episodes on forgotten history, all you have to do is subscribe.